Thanks, Christian and Benoit. My name is Peter Duinker. I'm Professor Emeritus at Dalhousie University, and my role is to try to be helpful here for your learning about urban forests. Before I make my opening presentation, I thought it would be helpful if everyone could have a chance to say their name and which city they're in or which program they're in. And that's all because we want to scoot through these introductions and get right to the subject matter. So we'll start here in Halifax, where there are 4 of my research assistants assembled. And if you guys could state your name and raise your hand so they know which one of you is speaking, that would be a good thing. And then I'll point out other groups if I can see what it says on the screen, which is far away from me right now. So anyway, let's start with us, Jordan.
We don't hear you. I'm sorry. You have to talk to Peter's computer, I think.
Yeah, you do.
Hello, can you hear me?
No, not very well.
Hello, is this better?
Better.
Nice. Okay, I'm Jordan. I'm currently.
No, you have to speak to the computer. Yeah.
I'm really hitting this out of the park right now. I'm a research assistant working with Peter, currently under the Urban Forest Master Plan, looking at juvenile mortality rates, preparing different research projects for the city.
Thank you. Who's next to crowd up to my laptop here?
Hi, I'm Zoe. I'm basically doing the same thing. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Joey, but we didn't hear. So you really have to look at the computer, because when you turn and look in the screen, we lose everything you say.
Hi, I'm Zoe, and I've also been working as a research assistant with Peter. Hi everyone, I'm Hannah. I'm currently going to my second year of my master's in resource and environmental management at Dalhousie. Is currently completing my internship with Peter.
And I'm Tyler. I'm one of Peter's students as well, an MES student at Dalhousie.
Can we now go to the Montreal group?
Yes. Do people in Habitat in Montreal want to present themselves? And then we can do the ones that are individually at home.
Okay, I can start. I'm Efi Ganyopudi. I am a PhD student in Tanya Handa Lab, and I study the impact of perturbation on Columbola. Thank you.
I wonder if the group is muted.
Hi, yeah, I'm Matt. I'm a student of Christian's, and I'm primarily interested in biomechanics and keeping really big trees from falling down.
And being cut.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so I don't know if you hear me, but I'm Laura, and I'm a PhD student at Tanya, and I'm regarding checking urban soil forests in regard to management of land.
Hi, I'm Julian. I'm a master's student with Christian and Daniel Misha, and I'm interested in the interaction between urban trees and electrical wires.
Okay. Okay. Hi.
No.
Hi, I'm Romain Yeager. I will start PhD in fall 2021 with Sylvain Delagrange and Marc Cadot, and I will study ecological connectivity and ecosystem service and these services relationships.
You're muted, Julien.
Hello, I'm Julian, a student at University of Montreal, doing a PhD in public health, and I'll be modeling ultrafine particles in urban environment.
Voyez-vous?
Oui.
Okay. Hello, I'm Jeremy. I'm a master's student in Tanya Lab, and I study columbola also in different type of urban vegetation, such as forest, shrub, lawn, and tree and lawns.
Hi, I'm Maggie. I'm a student of Alain Paquette and Daniel Misha, and I'm studying how the climate change, especially drought, affect the growth of the tree, urban trees.
Hi, I'm Hugo, and I'm working on for a master degree on heat islands in highways environment with Alain Paquette as well.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and I will start my PhD in September with Alain Paquette too in Montreal, and I will work on the modelization of the distribution of pollen in the greater Montreal.
Hi, I'm David. I'm a PhD student with Alain Paquette as well, and Dan Nisha, Dominique C. And I'm building allometric equation for urban trees to quantify their services.
And I'm Bastian. I'm studying trees architecture with LiDAR, and I'm postdoc in Montreal with Christian.
Hi, I'm Annick. I'm working with Christian and Sylvain Delagrange at UCO. I'm a postdoc, and I'm working on, oh, sorry. You have to tell me. And I'm working on SilCity, an informatic tool to plan tree plantation, and I will talk about it on Wednesday.
So I think we can switch to Toronto right now. We just finished everyone that was in Montreal.
Okay, we're unmuted. You can hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'll take my hand off there. This is Sandy Smith, and I have to come into the, there. Sorry, we've got it pointed in one direction. So University of Toronto, working on, I guess, urban forestry, but my area is more invasive species and insect infestations and loss of canopy. So that's me, and I'll just maybe I'll start here with Françoise, and then we'll go around.
Hello, everybody. My name is Françoise. I'm working with Mark Cadotte here at the Scarborough campus in Toronto, and looking at the impacts of forest layers on urban forest succession, basically. Next, Camilo.
Yeah, sure. Hello. I don't know if you can see me, but I'm down here. My name is Camilo.
Yeah.
I see you.
My name is Camilo. I'm at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, working on trees in cities, very general stuff.
Preet, you want to lean in?
Hi everybody, this is Preet, and I'm just starting as a new PhD student with Dr. Sandy Smith, and I'll be working with the ecology of EAV. Thank you.
Stand up.
Well, you better look, yeah, oh, there you are.
Hey everyone, my name is Menelik. I'm a PhD student with Mark Cadotte, studying forest and landscape restoration. Yeah, and urban ecology is generally my focus. So yeah, nice to meet you all.
And then there is Josh. who's in Toronto.
I'm Josh. I'm doing my Master's of Forest Conservation at U of T. And I spent like my summer doing research with Sandy, focusing on tree maintenance of urban street trees and how it affects microhabitat prevalence.
So does that bring us to Vancouver?
Yeah. Kit, yeah, she's actually Vancouver. So.
Kind of. Hi, everyone. My name is Kit. I'm a master's student at UBC, but I'm currently in Toronto, so I'm hanging out with the Toronto team. I study how heat vulnerable community members use street trees to cope with heat. And I also do some stuff with public health and environmental justice.
Great. This can bring us to a nice transition to other UBC students. Maybe Caitlin?
Hi, everyone. My name is Caitlin. I'm just starting my second year of my PhD at UBC in Vancouver. My thesis advisor is Dr. Lorian Nesbitt, and I study urban forest governance, green equity, and public perceptions of the urban forest.
Thank you. And then last but not least, Joanna from
Hey.
far
Yeah,
away.
I'm also officially from Vancouver. I study with Caitlin. I'm also a PhD student with Laurie Nesbitt. I have a background in psychology, so my research is focused on green space use and the connection to well-being and health, and human city inhabitants. But currently I'm in Germany in the car. Hopefully I'm not in the car anymore in a few minutes.
And where are you driving in Germany? What part of Germany are you driving through now?
No, we were just out for the day, but I'm from Frankfurt, so a village close to Frankfurt.
Okay.
So back to you, Peter.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much. Very diverse group. And I think I've seen everybody's name in various emails. Now it's good to put an identity to the individuals. So the next 45 minutes or an hour or whatever it takes will be taken up with a presentation that I will give. And so what it means is you can probably helpfully turn off your video because I don't want to see you anyway when I'm making my presentation. And it will save some bandwidth somewhere. And then Benoit, I need for you to give me permission, I think, to share my screen. Is that correct?
I just made you co-host, so you should have all.
Just made me co-host. Okay, so I'm going to share something here. And oh, wait a sec. Now I'm going to share again. And so I wonder if you're seeing my screen, but only my screen and not my prompting screen.
We just see your presentation from PowerPoint.
Man, oh man, this is working. Right. So I'm not sure if I'll stick to this subject matter faithfully, but we will talk about canopy cover and its problems and opportunities. The part of this that's about an urban forest management plan goal, it will come and go. And so my aim in this presentation is to use my perspectives as I've developed them over the past 15 years, having turned my focus to urban forests from the rural forest, just to prompt all you folks who are listening to think about urban canopy cover in a much deeper and richer way than we might have before. And I want to prompt some scholarly debate. We're all learned people here on the call, and you know, without joking about it, all the questions are for me, according to Christian. But the questions and retorts can be to everybody, and we'll just have a good discussion about canopy cover. You'll see in my photographs there 3 images of the same little triangle of land. These trees were planted, I believe, in 2013. That's 12 sugar maples in a very small spot that had no trees at all. And I took the lowest picture just a few days ago as I prepared for this presentation. And this sugar bush, as I expect it to become, is growing extremely well. The sad news is that these trees will all have to be moved in the next couple of years or cut down because the city is remodeling the streetscape here, and the place where those trees stand is needed for something else. One of the, the typical tragedy we have of starting a development in canopy cover and then losing it. So I'll talk a little bit about what canopy cover is and how we think about it. How does canopy cover relate to conventional forestry? I'm not sure if that's the right descriptor, conventional. Maybe it's rural or hinterland or timber production forestry, but it's the other side. It's the non-urban forest management. I'll speak just for a moment about how we measure canopy cover. I want to spend some time speaking to issues of space and time. Then I will actually expose a few numbers from urban forest management plans. I want to speak a lot to what we are missing when we use simple measures of canopy cover. And I'm going to make a case that we throw it out because it's too simple a concept to really guide us much in urban forest management. And then I've got a few concluding thoughts with a couple of principles that should irritate at least some of you. So what is canopy cover? Well, to try to boil it down to simple terms, it's the amount or proportion of the Earth's surface when we view it from above, and it's mainly from above, that shows tree leaves to the viewer. Or shall we say, it shows tree leaves to the sun. In this image, you see an image of Point Pleasant Park, which is about 70 hectares of woodland at the south end of Halifax. This image is a recent one, so it shows a forest that is largely regenerating, largely naturally regenerating, following Hurricane Juan in September of 2003. But it's actually quite fascinating to look at images of Point Pleasant Park, both before the hurricane, and that image is 2001. And those of us who have lived in Halifax for a long time really recognize that as the mature softwood dominated forest it was. And then data collected after the cleanup in the winter of 2004, where you can see that, if you did a count, it'd be about 80% of the woodland of Point Pleasant Park was blown down and then cleaned up. And then after that cleanup, we had to decide what it was we were going to do for regeneration. So to put those three images beside each other, it kind of looks like we have probably 90% or more canopy cover before the hurricane. We were down to about 20% canopy cover immediately after the hurricane. And now 15 years or 18 years, whatever it is, after the hurricane, we're back to probably the same canopy cover, although a very different size and distribution of canopy cover today. Here are two other images where we can think about canopy cover. The one on the left is the Halifax Common, and the canopy cover there is probably what, 5% of that, maybe less. And it's an ecosystem I walk through every day, and I'm constantly wondering why there isn't more canopy cover in various spots around this green space. And you'll see in the other diagram, that's a residential area where the canopy cover is probably 40 or 50%. In the very center of the image where it says home, that's where this august group of Haligonians is sitting right at this moment. And we are under the urban canopy cover as I speak. So how does canopy cover relate to conventional forestry? And here, if the real foresters in the group need to differ with me, you can, but you can only do it at the very end of my talk because I would prefer to be able to keep on going, even if my facts are not facts, but rather misinformation. But for us in urban forestry, when we use this kind of this abbreviation CC, we actually mean canopy cover. But in conventional forestry, generally speaking, when we use this abbreviation CC, we mean crown closure. And that's a similar measure and often measured actually in different ways. So urban foresters want higher canopy cover for all the benefits that are conferred upon ecosystems and their inhabitants like us from foliage that is borne up high. We're not talking about grass. The grass is foliage, grass is green, the grass has its role to a much more limited degree than I think its abundance would betray. But we're not talking about grass. We're talking about foliage that is borne on plants that are tall. But conventional foresters also want high crown closure so that all the available growing space, which is measured on a horizontal plane, no vertical piece to it, is taken up by trees. And they want that preferably on crop trees that will have high value in the trunk wood. And I remember learning from my very insightful PhD supervisor, Gordon Baskerville, this concept of full site occupancy. Now, Gordon was a master of managing forests for timber. And when you think about the growth of timber, what you want is a stand of trees where photosynthesis is going on every square meter, and it's going on in the foliage of trees that are going to be put to market sooner or later. It's a bit of an old concept, but that's the way I see the difference between canopy cover and crown closure. So how do we measure canopy cover in its simplest terms? Many people are still using some kind of dot grid on top of imagery. You could put that dot grid on imagery in a random way. You could put it on in a systematic way. If you have enough dots, you can ultimately interpret the imagery underneath the dot as the dot falls on a tree or tree foliage, or it doesn't fall on tree foliage. And then if you add up the dots and do the conversion to proportion, you can get a measure of crown closure in percentage of the landscape. Today, we can get much more sophisticated than that if we have half-decent imagery, most people finding it a blessing to finally have something as good as LiDAR so that each tree's crown can be mapped and we can get at canopy cover in a more sophisticated way. Now, crown closure methods are often methods used on the ground, although crown closure is estimated by people who interpret aerial photographs when they make maps of the forest for forest inventory purposes. But there are several kinds of devices that are used in the measurement of crown closure, one being hemispherical photos, where you take a photo straight up into the crown and interpret that. There's something called a moose horn densiometer. I've never seen one, but I found pictures online. I've certainly seen and used a spherical densiometer, which is an optical device where you can look up at the crown through this grid pattern on the lens. And then, of course, you could use the line intercept method where you'd lay out a tape, maybe 100 meters or whatever, and you would measure how often or how many meters are underneath crown and use that as an approach to get to crown closure or canopy cover. So we have a variety of ways to get at it. Let me speak to an issue of space in relation to canopy cover. And I'm going to localize this discussion in the context of Halifax, which is not a unique situation in Canada, but it is quite different than many of the situations you folks may find yourselves in. And if we had people on this call from, say, Regina or Moose Jaw or other prairie towns, it would be very different. Halifax used to be a fairly small city geographically of about 175 or 200,000 people. But then in 1996, it amalgamated with the city of Dartmouth, the town of Bedford, and then the county of Halifax. And you can see that county is from east to west, probably close to 200 kilometers. And from the ocean up to the land side, it's probably 60 or 70 kilometers. So Halifax as a city is fairly small, but Halifax as a municipality is absolutely huge. And so an issue that faces us is, where do we draw the boundaries of the city when we want to make a canopy cover calculation? Well, we faced this in very directly when it came time for us for the first time to develop an urban forest master plan in 2010 to 2012. And before we started the development of the plan, John Simmons, our urban forester, decided that he wanted a so-called UFOR inventory. UFOR is the software forerunner to the iTree Eco software that is currently available for urban forestry. So we had to make some decisions. We're not going out to Upper Musquodoboit or Moser River to measure trees for the urban forest, because territorially, we're more rural forest than anything else. And so there's the boundary of the entire Halifax Regional Municipality. In this image, you see two extents of urban development. When we did the UFOR inventory to try to get at canopy cover and some of its characteristics, it was necessary to use some kind of a straightforward criterion to map out where does the city stop and the rural forest begin. And so John Simmons used the extent of snow plowing by the city, by the municipality. Outside of this domain, snow plowing of the roads is done by the province. So we drew a boundary around that, and the UFOR inventory was done across that entire red space, including what's in blue. What we discovered, though, very quickly was that we had far too many of these randomly sampled points that fell in what's essentially quite rural forest. And okay, we did the inventory on this basis, but when it was time to cut to the chase and or develop an urban forest master plan for the city, we needed something tighter. We didn't want to have this master plan really extend to all these reaches of habitation around the city core. So we used another rather arbitrary spatial criterion, and that was
We can't hear you anymore, Peter. Is it just on my end?
No, Benoit, I think he's frozen.
Yeah, Peter is frozen, which is very rare occurrence. No.
I'll see if he is still in the participants.
Yeah, I know, I unmuted. Yeah, we can't hear others.
I think he's logged out. No, he's still there.
But he's removed his camera, no?
Yeah, but his microphone is not even there anymore.
Yeah. Okay, Benoit, you have to continue his talk.
I can't even see his slides. If only I had the slides, I could, but. Send him a quick email.
Yeah, I hope he knows. Well, you won't see the email. Do you have a phone number where we can text him or even phone him?
Don't have a phone number for Peter.
Sandy, do you?
Just a second.
I'll check myself. I think I do have somewhere.
I must have somewhere. Peter. He sent us a lot.
Kick him out. Should I?
Yeah, I have a cell. Ah, Peter is back.
Oh, you're back.
All right.
Now, I think I need to share screen again?
Yes.
Okay, I'll share. And can I get at my video button? Oh, there it is. I'm going to stop my video. All right. Am I being heard?
Yes. I think you were a few slides back though. We missed a few.
So let me back one here. So I wanted to say that if this slide is one you haven't seen or I haven't narrated,
You were on this you were on this one when it froze.
Yeah, okay. Well, the big boundary is what was plowed with the snow plow that belongs to HRM. The inner boundary, the blue, was what was is serviced by sewer and water, and we chose to do the urban forest master plan on what is in the blue. And so where you see estimates of canopy coverage in a kind of a broad, complete synoptic sense, it was for the red area, and it's actually much too high because it does not represent the same kind of land use patterns as in the blue area alone. And here's an example of a neighborhood on the left-hand side, Kingswood neighborhood, that did not get any coverage in the urban forest master plan. These are 2-acre lots or almost 1 hectare lots, and they get they either have water or sewer, but not both, and so they were left out of the urban forest master plan. And the neighborhoods on the right-hand side, which are mostly new neighborhoods, newer than Kingswood, they are all included in the urban forest master plan. And some of them definitely need to be included because there's been a lot of deforestation to establish those neighborhoods. Here's another one where space kind of matters. And so I went out to visit this and was just astonished at how much forest had been kind of cleared. Although this was actually in the territory of the Spryfield fire of 2009. And so there wasn't much woodland anyway. But if you look at the urban forest or the urban development here, there's not a tree to be seen. Now there are trees in this urban landscape because they've been planted there. But if I were somebody living there and told the urban forest chiefs of the city, I want more trees, and somebody in the city said, "What's the problem? You've got rural forests within 500 meters of your home. Give us a break." Yeah, well, that could be canopy cover, but it's canopy cover in the wrong place. I don't mind that canopy cover being there, but it cannot make up for canopy cover in this new suburban development. So let me report on a little study where we looked at space. David Foster, who's currently doing a PhD with me, did a little study 5 years ago, and he looked at 4 kinds of locations for trees, beside roads, beside buildings, in parks, and out in the woodlands, hinterlands. And he looked at 20 some odd urban forest values, and he tried to come up with a scheme where he looked at how much delivery of ecosystem services is there, depending on which location trees lie in. And so here's a kind of a quick and dirty examination where the dark green and the number 3 represent a very strong delivery of the ecosystem service. And just by visual representation, you can see that of all of these ecosystem services, the trees that are standing beside roads have the highest delivery of them. Now, what I don't want to do is linger on this graph because then you'll start poking holes in some of the individual assignments and wondering how they got that way. So we'll just venture right by that. But let's have a look at the negative side. Where does it cost the most? Or where do trees do the most damage or bad things? The disservices side of canopy cover? Well, it turns out it's beside roads. And so we have this conundrum that the best range of ecosystem services provided is beside roads or streets, and then the most disservices actually occur beside the streets as well. So space matters. Let me address a little bit the issues of time. One thing I'd like to point out is that while we speak of canopy cover in the city, we often don't talk about winter canopy cover. We talk about summer canopy cover. And canopy is so much tied up in our notions of foliage. And here's a scene of my street, the big winter storm. And there's no canopy coverage here in the sense of foliage whatsoever, because there are no conifers or no evergreen trees, let me put it that way, bearing their foliage So, 6 months of the year, if we have a deciduous canopy, we are without canopy cover. The Romans knew how to fix this. They put the Pinus pinea pine tree throughout their city. And so they've got canopy coverage for what it's worth, 12 months of the year. I'm not saying we should do this, and we are very reluctant to put conifers in our streets, but maybe we could take a hint from the Romans. Another issue of time and space is this one, and they come together as time and space. What I've shown here are 2 rows of trees. The upper one is a row of Helia cordata. It's not along the side of a road, but it's along the side of a parking lot. And those trees are 4 meters apart. And then the bottom picture is a row of European beech, and those trees are 5 meters apart. And the point I'd like to make is canopy coverage accrues where you had none in the beginning much faster if you have your trees close together. And so time is, space substitutes for time when you have trees very close together. As opposed to this scene where the trees are probably 25 to 30 meters apart. And I can guarantee you that unless these were live oaks in New Orleans, those crowns will never touch. And having crowns touch is a very good thing, in my opinion, in the urban forest. Another issue of time is this one. Curiously, we can lose canopy, and a lot of it, in seconds to minutes. These trees didn't take any more than 5 or 10 seconds to fall down, and those are permanent losses from the urban forest canopy. And yet on the other side, to replace that, if you're putting scrap into the streets like this stuff that we put in 2003, you're putting it in a narrow tree lawn, you're backfilling with gravel, it's going to take an awfully long time to replace the canopy you can lose so very fast. So let's flip to urban forest master plans and see how they deal with canopy closure. I know Camilo is in the audience. Camilo and I have a paper from some 6 or 8 years ago where Camilo did an examination of as many urban forest management plans as we could find at the time, back in 2013, let's say, and there were only about 15 of them. Now there's dozens and dozens of urban forest master plans. I took a quick glance through some of them I could find, and I noticed that pretty much every one of them has a canopy cover goal at the strategic level, the very highest level. I don't know what Toronto's current canopy cover is, but Toronto has said, yeah, we want to increase that to 40%. Hamilton's urban forest strategy has just been released, and they want to move it from the 21% up to 30%. Courtney, BC says it wants to increase it to some range between 34 and 40. Vancouver, I don't know where they're starting from, but they want to get it up to 22%. Curiously, we didn't have such a goal in the Halifax plan, but we did speak to parks, trying to get the canopy coverage up to 40% across all the parks, that is. In the riparian areas that are controlled by the city, we wanted to have those reach an average of 80%. Ottawa, curiously, is unspecified with respect to canopy coverage, except that there is a goal in the official plan, not the urban forest strategy, of getting to 30%. And I could go on and on about these canopy cover goals. So it's rather interesting to think, and which we will do by the time we get to the end of my talk. What does it all mean to put these kinds of goals, especially like Toronto did as their first strategic goal? What does it mean to actually put a goal in to reach a certain percentage? And I also find it very curious that so many of the numbers for percentage end in 0. And so that suggests to me that there's more arbitrariness in this than might be called for. So everybody wants more. Nobody says, oh, we have way too much canopy cover, let's get less of it. So let's talk then about what we're missing when we use simple measures of canopy cover. Well, first of all, we miss foliage density. If you did a canopy coverage of the black walnut tree on the left, you'd end up with the same number as, roughly speaking, as the canopy coverage of the basswood on the right. They're both young trees. The amount of foliage is very different on these two trees. They're both growing in a streetscape and doing well. Their crown coverage, their contribution to canopy cover as a simple area measure would be the same. But we all know that if so many ecosystem services are obtained on account of the foliage, foliage density is incredibly important. Foliage quality is also a key factor. Not all leaves are built the same. And so if we think about some of the ecosystem services, for example, particulate removal, the elm on the left, leaf per leaf or leaf area per leaf area is way better at this job than the pin oak that's on the right. We also don't think much about canopy interactions. So you'll see pin oaks on the left side that are a long distance apart from each other. And I come back to the European lindens, this little leaf linden on the right-hand side. If canopies interact with each other and you lose a tree, like any one of the trees on the right-hand side, if you lose one of those trees, I guarantee you there will be no loss of canopy coverage. And it's because the tree crowns interact with each other so deeply. If you lose one of the pin oaks on the left-hand side, you are definitely losing canopy cover. I'm not saying you're not losing foliage on the right-hand side. You are, and some functionality is lost. But when it comes to measuring canopy cover, you can't you can't detect the difference in simple measures of canopy cover if you lose a tree on the right. Canopy health. So here are two elm trees, and I'm very familiar with the one on the right-hand side because a month ago, it got a very heavy pruning because there was so much deadwood in it. It's sitting right in front of my house, and the elm tree on the left is in front of my neighbor's house, and his got a very minor touch-up during that same operation. But I feel pretty strongly that the canopy on the right is not going to last as long. It's got too little foliage to support that size of individual tree, and the canopy on the left-hand side is going to do well. And so in a simple measure of canopy coverage, these trees look the same. They're not the same at all when it comes to ecosystem services. Well, we have the issue of canopy layers as well. And simple measures of canopy cover cannot accommodate multiple layers of canopy. Well, we think about multiple layers of canopy in the rural woods all the time, especially guys like Christian who promote complexity in forest structure and composition. Well, what you're looking at in this image is a tree right beside me, 2 meters from me, the big Norway maple, and then the little sugar maple that's showing brightly on the right-hand side is about 5 meters away from me. And that little sugar maple, which is the tree destined to be in the canopy in a couple of decades, cannot show up in simple measures of canopy cover. And yet it's an extremely important part of the evolution of my little miniature Acadian tree farm here in Halifax. Well, and we have canopy quality as well. And so we look up high up in the sky at my rather thinned out elm tree, which I don't think will last very long. And then down below, we've got very vibrant beech on the left and yellow birch on the right. So I want to make my case for throwing out simple concepts like canopy cover, which just about every urban forest master plan has in it as one of its profile numbers. We can measure how much of any land parcel, like a town or a city, seen from above, shows tree leaves to the sky instead of other surfaces. That would allow us to calculate a proportion of canopy cover. The question is, though, how does that number help people understand their urban forest management challenges and opportunities? My answer today is none whatsoever. And I want to stick to that for the moment to see how it goes over in this august academic community. And so, of course, you're asking why. It's because a single broad canopy cover goal for a town or a city is more or less useless because it's always higher than actual. And so where does that really get us? And it's, 50% of the time or more, it ends with a 0. And so it's an arbitrary number. Have people actually done analysis on the opportunities for growing canopy and the constraints against keeping and growing canopy to figure out when they might be able to reach 40% and what it will take? I doubt it. It always ignores critically important factors such as, and we've talked about these, tree location, tree species, as if every tree species grew the same kind of foliage that we want for ecosystem services as every other one. It totally ignores tree densities, especially when the crowns start to grow into each other. It totally ignores the timing of delivery of tree benefits. It ignores tree ages or development stages, if I can put it that way, as if a square meter of those lovely sugar maples, a square meter of canopy there would be as good as, 90-year-old elm on my street. It ignores tree health because even a Norway maple tree that's about to die because of stress in the street, it shows up as canopy cover just as well as a healthy young basswood. And it totally ignores equity considerations, even though in the implementation of a broad canopy cover goal, trying to reach it, equity considerations could be a major player. So what might we want for an urban forest in a much more considered way than simple canopy cover? Well, we certainly want more high quality, well-located aerial foliage on long-lived healthy trees. And I'm going to go further. I feel like I have an audience. I should go on a rant. My students haven't left the audience yet, and so that's a good thing. I want to argue that canopy cover should not necessarily be on big trees. Some folks in the USDA Forest Service have published a paper called The Big Tree Argument, Why It's Important to Have Our Trees Be Big Ones. I would say that tree size matters only if you're searching for maximum benefit per tree. But I would argue that maximum benefit of aerial foliage should be gauged on a per unit land area. And you can get the same amount of foliage carried in the sky on the same species of trees if you have 10 big ones or 100 quite a bit smaller ones. And if you're not growing timber for the market, then maybe the smaller ones would be a better deal. So to sum that up, a high density of small trees can deliver full site occupancy much sooner than can a low density of trees that will eventually become big. So that's the problem with big trees, is that you can't plant them that closely together. And when you plant them, they're the same size as the trees that are going to grow up and be a little bit smaller. So everything starts off at kind of the same place, especially if you say caliper tree for caliper tree. So consider these questions. If you could show a square meter of the worst land cover to the sun, what would it be? I don't want you to answer that, except to think about it just for a moment before I show you an image of what I think it is. I think it's asphalt. Asphalt is the worst stuff we could cover soil with. It's full of toxins. The toxins go to the air, the toxins go to the water. It doesn't last that long. Why would you ever want to cover the world in asphalt? Okay, put the question the other way. If you could show a square meter of the best land cover to the sun, what would that be? And you better answer trees, because that's the theme of the day. A lot of canopy cover to the sun, and we'll all be much happier. So then I ask the question, if we insist on having lots of the worst kind of land cover in our cities, and by the way, pavement covers so much of our urban settings, how do we reduce their negative impacts? Well, I would argue that it's simple. You put the trees over top of the parking lot. And so here's an example of a parking lot in the city of Bordeaux in France, and you look down at this canopy and you would say, that is a lovely park. Well, it turns out it's 100% canopy cover over a parking lot. And I've been in this parking lot in the wintertime. I've never seen it on foot when it has full foliage, but this has got to be a most enlightened way of managing what is showing to the sun. The trees are showing to the sun and the cars are shaded underneath this 100% London plain canopy. But you know, we want lots of foliage, but it has to be on the right kinds of trees in good abundance. And I asked my urban forest colleagues, why in heaven's name are we planting a whole bunch of columnar trees? That foliage is great for some purpose, some ecosystem services, but it's totally awful for the service of covering the pavement. It will never cover the pavement. Having trees shade asphalt is something we ought to want. And we don't get it when we load the streets with trees that look like this and will never look any different, except they'll get taller and a little bit rounder. So I went on a little bike ride a couple of days ago to go out and get some more pictures for this presentation. And I knew that I had to have a good look at Barrington Street, which has had some rebuilding of the streetscape, mostly in the perspective of cycleway and new curb structures and redevelopment of the lanes. Barrington Street is a very important access road along the northeast side of our city, and it goes all the way from industrial territory to residential territory and commercial territory in between. So I've got 4 spots here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's look at the trees at each one of these spots. And so my students have measured, the guys who are sitting on the deck here with me, they've measured all these trees along the left side. And so this all got redeveloped. The tree lawn is about 1.5 meters wide, not too bad. We don't have power lines above, we just have these communications cables. And what do they plant? They plant columnar oak. Well, who needs columnar oak along the side of Barrington Street? I would rather see red oak, or, you know, if we could grow it here, live oak, get the branches right over top of the street and shade the pavement. And by the way, can you guess what is the distance between these trees? I paced them out. The closest is 20 meters, the furthest is 40 meters. Even if you had the most spreading of canopies, they would never touch in the linear direction of this cycleway. So these may have well been put in as plastic amenities, because they're never going to do much when it comes to ecosystem services along the street. Well, then there was a community tree plant down along near the bridge, and these trees are growing fantastically, and somebody is doing clandestine pruning of these trees to raise the crowns a bit so you can see through. And I'm pretty sure it's not the city that's doing that pruning, otherwise it'd be much harsher pruning. This is the kind of thing I think we should look forward to in expansion of the canopy, where you still have grass, but over top of that grass, the expectation is a pretty sweet canopy. But further south along this cycleway is a magnificent row of interspersed elms and red oaks. And these were planted at about the time just after the hurricane, no, not after the hurricane, about 2013 or so. I remember when these were fairly young trees, and I think there's been 1 of 60 trees die, which is a pretty good success rate, and they are growing fantastically. Their distance apart is about 6 or 8 meters. And the expectation is to make this kind of an iconic row of trees for the access to Halifax and people leaving the downtown of Halifax. The most magnificent set of trees. And then, of course, we come back to the little triangle of sugar maples that I find to be so inspiring. They're planted wonderfully close together, and we're not going to have this stand for any more than a couple of years. And I'm really encouraging the urban forester to get a tree spade in so we can lift those trees and put them somewhere where they can reach the ripe old age and maybe deliver some maple syrup to my great-great-great-grandchildren. And so why do we focus on canopy cover? And I can take some blame for this because I think it was me who threw up the holy grail of canopy cover. Well, you know, let's just use it as an entry point, as a portal into the mysteries and complexities of so many aspects of urban forests. And so our journey through the story of the urban canopy cover this week is today's field visits and conversations about various dimensions of canopy cover. Tomorrow, the intention is to look at examples of how we make it bigger and maybe also better as we think about aspects of canopy cover quality. And then on Wednesday, the intent is to look at why canopy cover gets smaller, both intentionally and unintentionally. On Thursday, we'll have an examination of how governance influences canopy cover. And at least here in Halifax, we're going to spend most of our time looking at institutional lands deep in the city. And then Friday, the intent is to look at equity considerations with respect to distributions of both quality and quantity of canopy cover. So what's your perspective on all this stuff, folks? Here's mine. Let me put it down here. I've got, I think, 4 statements I'd like to make. And one is, this first one is a matter of perspective. It's the same organisms, but what we're interested in the organisms is so very different. In timber production forestry, we're only interested in the leaves as they support the creation of wood, and it's mostly wood in the trunks of the trees. But in urban forestry, we're only interested in the wood. And I know I'll irritate people who want to get wood out of the city trees for their various purposes, but the only reason I'm interested in the wood is because I need it to support the creation of leaves, the creation and nurture of the leaves. So it's wood out in the countryside when we're growing timber for market, and it's leaves, not trees, it's leaves in the city. And I spoke to my students this morning about not taking this too very seriously, but I always ask myself, in the city where a tree can grow, I think it should. Now, there are lots, if you take this in the biophysical sense, we might have too many trees, because if you want a vegetable garden, you're not going to grow that under a tree canopy. If you want a nice flower garden of sun-loving plants, you're not going to grow that under a tree canopy. But boy, as I look around this city and see all the spaces where nothing else is going on in that space, and it's showing soil, not concrete, to the sky or grass, we should load those with trees. And as we talked a lot this morning, as we were out in the field, the best place for leaves in the city is above us, not below us. Now, granted, in the ball field, the leaves have to be on the ground. In the golf course, the grass has to be on the ground. But in the rest of the city, where we can afford to have the shade that trees confer, then the leaves should be above us. And they don't have to be, 100 meters above us. We can't get that anyway. But it would be good if they were more than 1 meter above us. And that's what, thankfully, is our situation, where foliage can be anywhere from 5 meters, well, even 3 meters from the ground, up to 30 meters from the ground in our Eastern North American situation anyway. And then finally, my statement is this: a city is best seen not as a complex of built infrastructure with a few trees carefully mixed in, but rather as a complex forest with a bit of built infrastructure carefully mixed in. That's my talk on canopy cover and its problems and opportunities. I am a tree hugger, although this one was not in the urban setting. It's a wonderful European beach in a rural setting. So I hope I've irritated you sufficiently to be able to respond to some of the comments I've made. And I will start my video and stop. Maybe you want to stop the share, Benoit? Or do I stop the share?
I can stop.
Oh, stop share. I see it there, but now my doggone. Where's my cursor? Oh, it's up there. Stop share. There.
There you go. I've had a question from some of the participants that wanted to know if you were willing to share your PowerPoint with the students.
Oh, heavens no. No. The PowerPoint only goes with the guy who talks through the PowerPoint. Yeah, I can do that. Sure.
Perfect. Since we recorded it anyways, they actually have also the voice of the guy that goes with the PowerPoint.
Yeah. Yeah, with one minor interruption in the middle of the talk, I hope.
I'll be able to edit that out seamlessly.
Oh boy.
Please, everybody, I invite you to react to Peter. Of course, I have lots of reaction myself, but I want to hear from you first.
I see Matt wants to get in.
Yeah, I want to take an opportunity to pick on Peter because I think it was very, very good. Peter, that was great. It was kind of refreshing, actually. I really enjoyed a good portion of it. I'll start things off with. I will start things off with the fact that I think age diversity really needs to be in there as well, and you touched on it a little bit. But my big point is that you made this comment about big trees, and not that I think big trees are everything, but you also made the comment about the size of trees and trees growing over the pavement. And I think this is something that we do need to make a big point for large trees, because it is those large trees that make that canopy cover happen over top of large trees. I think we still need a good age diversity so that we don't lose, we have the problem of aging out big trees all over most of the cities in North America right now. But as we move forward, we had this thing in the past where we planted too many small trees because of right tree, right place from the ISA, et cetera. And I think we do need to continue to push for those big trees. So anyway, it was a great presentation, but that's my point.
Thanks, Matt. And I totally agree with you. It was just more of an incendiary remark rather than my true feelings. I love big trees, but I also love small ones.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, exactly.
Just like dogs, the only nice small dog is one that grows big. And so I like puppy trees.
While you wait for a question, thank you, Peter. I just thought about your point about the misuse of an overall canopy cover. Made me think of when we use GDP to compare countries or to even have some objectives, and we miss the fact that GDP might not be well, I mean, how do you say, divided among the people, or it may actually have no impact really on happiness or well-being of the people. And I think there's a similarity to be made about a use of a percentage cover. I think it's used because it's easy, and often people have found out that it's easy to achieve an objective just by moving some of the limits of the city or including some other parks. So, there's maybe an element of, I will almost call it easiness in using it to achieve their objective. So I totally agree with you. We need something much more sophisticated. And just to finish with an assessment of percentage of tree in the city, there was the study done by the Google car, and when they compare Toronto and Montreal, they find that there was more trees on the street in Montreal than Toronto, although Toronto has a higher canopy cover. And I suppose it's because they have maybe more large parks that make it look better, but when the trees are close to the streets and maybe more important in terms of impact, maybe there's not such a big differences. So the quality of the trees, where they are, I think you nail it very well. Space is everything, and I think it's very important.
Thanks, Christian.
Do we have other questions from the audience or comments?
I was going to make a comment more from Toronto, and just to respond to Christian. I mean, it's not necessarily parks, it's our ravine system, Christian. There's a huge network of green veins running through the city. Even I didn't appreciate this till I was sort of dragged into them, and you start to appreciate how much canopy cover those pathways and people use them extensively, right? Francoise was saying how surprised she was to see, right? All these people using these networks. So for sure, I'm just going to jump in here and say, you know, of course, we're all agreeing with Peter, not because he's right, but it's timely that he says this. I mean, we started with canopy cover long ago being a decade or two, because there were no metrics. And so we started creating them, and it was the simplest one, as you said, Christian. It's simple. The media, the politicians, and the citizens relate to it, and they get inspired by it. In COVID has only magnified that, their time out in those spaces. But I guess I agree that it's time, and I think the foresters in us are doing a lot more than canopy cover, and new technologies that allow us to really dig down. Whether it'll ever replace canopy cover completely, I wonder, because it's so political. And you can achieve a lot, but maybe it's the difference between forest managers or people who are actually managing the forest versus the people who are paying for it.
Thanks, Sandy.
That's not a question, it's just a comment. It's my opinion, you asked for it, Peter.
Yeah, that's good. Camila will recall that when we did our street interception surveys of citizens in several cities, among the questions we asked people was, do you think we have enough trees in the city, too many or too few? Or the opposite of that, do you think we need more, or it's just right, or should we have fewer? And I think I know that the preponderance of people's opinions was that more would be sensible. And so that canopy cover goals are always more than we have is understandable. About 30%, or I don't know, a third, we're saying, oh, it's just about right, I like it the way it is. And then this residual of, I don't know, 10 or 20% is saying, I think we have too many trees. And that's about the same proportion we encounter, I think, when the street tree planting operations are going on in Halifax. If it isn't the planters themselves, it's my students who are out there running after the planters, measuring the characteristics that each tree put in. When they encounter people, I'm going to hazard a guess here, folks around the table, that you get more people than not who are appreciative of the fact that a tree is going in front of their home, but not on their property, of course, it's going on to city property. But there are still people around who say, don't you dare put a tree in there. If you do, tomorrow it'll be gone, because I'll cut it down. But coming back to the raw big number, two things. One is that big number of 40% canopy cover in the city, that's our target. That's not a whole lot different than the 2 billion tree planting target that Trudeau has trotted out for this decade as his kind of aspiration for what we should do around our carbon budgets and who knows what all else. Who did the analysis that said 2 billion? That is so right. That is absolutely the right number for Trudeau to put into policy for us to implement across Canada. I would hazard a guess that that was 2 minutes on the back of an envelope by a Canadian Forest Service economist. What number should we have? Oh, sure, make it 2 billion. We can probably get that done and in the ground. We don't know if 2 billion is right at all. And we also don't know if 40% is right. You know, people appreciate canopy, but if you said to somebody, what percentage of canopy cover do you think you're standing under or in or around? They wouldn't have a clue whether it was 40 or 60 or 20. So, and I'm not convinced that councillors, when you go with a proposal to move from 30 to 40% in your urban forest master plan, you say councillors are going to need this amount of money, whether that's motivating them, if we give the money, if they were going to give you any more money to do urban forest management. Here I am speaking to a crowd, though, of all people in the academy, and some of our partners may tell me
He's gone
No,
again.
no, no, he's back.
Yeah. We lost you for a second, Peter.
Peter, you're muted.
You've moved tiles. You're now.
Oh,
on-
Benoit, did you shut me down because you didn't like my rant?
No.
No, your rant got cut.
So we need more feedback from the students, and especially more criticism of Peter's talk, please. Matt, you did very well. I think I appreciate that.
I like Menelik's got one here.
Thanks for the talk, Peter. I have a couple questions, but I'll just start with kind of in the example with Halifax, looking at the area of a city when trying to quantify the canopy. I guess I was curious as to the definitions related to city extents, and then here in Toronto, we were talking about this earlier about using sort of the watershed as the extent of measure. And I was curious as to anybody's comments as to like what would be a good defining extents to be measuring. Is it just purely like you said, city boundaries, more like that watershed aspect, some kind of geographical way of measuring all of this?
So my response to that would be that watersheds could be an important way of carving up your city rather than determining its extent. And so if you felt that the urban canopy was providing an ecosystem service that was so tightly tied to watershed functioning, then you may want to assess canopy across the entire city extent according to watershed. And in some cities in Canada, that makes a huge amount of sense. But I don't think watersheds can help you determine where you stop at the periphery. Now, if we had done that, we might have ended up also deep in the rural forest because of the extent of our larger river catchments. In a place like Toronto, you go from Seal South and 407 east, and I don't know what piece of Scarborough Roadway, you bring it in the other side, you know what your territory of the municipality is, and it's entirely urban except for the ravines, which of course are the bottom. That's the bottom of the watershed kind of elevation. So I really support the use of watersheds if you want to examine urban canopy cover influences on watershed functioning, particularly stormwater control and that kind of stuff. But I don't think it would be that helpful to use it to reach out, because then you could be extending your area of interest way beyond what you can control. And North York's in charge of its, or York Region, whatever, it's in charge of its woodland. You got to leave North York up to that. And maybe that would be a prime example where if watershed functioning is so important, maybe a couple of urban municipalities will want to get together if it turns out that they share a very important watershed.
So I'll take a crack at Peter's. I like your talk, Peter. I especially like the image of growing trees in cities for the purpose of producing leaves rather than trunks. I think that's something that can really easily be sort of communicated to people. What I'm not sure about, or I will cast doubt on, is this idea that if our battery is low in Toronto, we may have some issues.
Keep talking.
Is this idea that if a tree can grow, it should grow there. But there's a significant gray area in what if a tree can grow might mean. We had someone this morning talking to us and pointing at many planting opportunities that might exist in cities like Edmonton. But maintaining dense tree cover in a city that is at the edge of the prairies it's possible, but it requires a whole lot of investment and continued maintenance. And so if we're going to have these great big long-lived trees, it might be worth it to prioritize in areas where they can grow for a long time rather than sort of maintaining them at the edge of their potential growing conditions.
Yeah, I totally agree. And maybe that rule that I espoused has more exceptions. It's more honored in the breach than it is honored. So it's a question I ask myself as I look through the landscape of any city I'm in. And if I were in Lethbridge with what, 350 millimeters of water a year, you know, I'd have a different view of if a tree can grow there, it should. And then I do in Halifax, where we get 1,500 millimeters a year, and it's not such a drain on the ecosystem's water resources to have a tree instead of grass. So there are many good reasons to not adopt the proposition that I put, where a tree can grow, it should. But we sat for a few minutes in the North Common, which is where all those ball diamonds were. And we kind of cast our eyes around, and there were a lot of places there where you should not grow a tree because it's in people's way for the things they want to do. But we also imagined that you could put 1,000 more trees in that 10 hectares or whatever the size of it is, and they wouldn't be in people's way at all. In fact, it would make it so much nicer a place to do sports than the 100% grass landscape that we have today.
Anyone from UBC? Anyone else from Montreal or Toronto want to pitch in on Peter's talk?
Grab it, Nat.
There we go. Yeah, I wonder if really we should be looking at, and again, this is just moving towards a simple solution for a more complex problem. But I mean, really, when you think about it in the urban context, it's always against built structure. So why should we not be considering a proportion of canopy volume or effective canopy volume to built structure? I mean, that would start to eliminate the idea of what you considered the city anyway. You could include everything, and as long as there was built structure in it, then the proportion of growing leaf area, and I mean, we're moving towards that with LiDAR, and when we start to look to that sort of an idea, I have trees growing over top of my house. I'm better off than if I have a small tree growing on the front lawn under the wires, or a pyramidal oak that's not doing anything. And so that would push towards, not only canopy, but volume as well, because we can grow things up high, we can grow things down low, and how you manage it. So, thoughts?
We're not very sophisticated, are we? In
No.
the way we think about the interactions between built infrastructure and green infrastructure, particularly trees. Maybe we should get a special presentation for UFOR from Stefano Boeri, the Italian architect who is building apartment buildings with trees growing out of them. It would be wonderful to listen to Friedens 200 Foster, but he's not alive anymore. And he also built buildings with a lot of trees in association with them. But yeah, I do like the concept of volume, but volumetrically measuring canopy is also, it's just adding one spatial dimension to the two that you have with canopy covers. So we still have a long way to go to think about all the other elements of canopy characteristics that I mentioned, even if we go to volume.
And I think it would be interesting to look at canopy quality and those sort of things. I mean, from our perspective, and Peter, you brought it up with your big elms and declining trees in the city. I mean, when we're managing it at the tree level, what we're doing to try and preserve a large tree over a period of time, sometimes you wonder, like, what is the benefit for that? I love big trees, but if I'm spending a huge amount of time and resources to keep a couple big ones, then what's the point? Yeah.
Well, sometimes we're willing to spend money on things that have little tangible, we can't really calculate out what that benefit is. I want that big tree to stay. Why? Because I love that big tree. So spend the money, city, and I'll spend the money on the trees that are on my property, and spend the time to manage them simply because I love them. I'm so attracted to those organisms. Right. Benoit, it's now 3:30 Atlantic. We should probably give ourselves 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So that students can queue up their presentations, and then we can regroup and go through the second half of the afternoon's agenda.
Sounds good. So we meet back here. I know Toronto just joined in back. I think they had other technical, I think their battery actually died. They're back.
Well, now we give them a chance to recharge.
Yeah, and so we say in 20 minutes. So in 20 minutes, everyone joins back and we'll have the students' presentations.